Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life Story 999. Today, we have an incredible story that's full of surprising twists and turns, a real lesson for us all about respect and humility. Remember, if you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And, as always, we love to hear your thoughts. What would you do in a situation like this? Let us know in the comments below. It was a bright Friday afternoon at the corner of Maple Street, just outside Bridgeport's busy downtown. The sun bathed the bustling streets in a warm glow, and people hurried along, unaware of the drama about to unfold. Officer Greg Manning, a man known for his short temper and inflated sense of authority, had just finished his lunch break and was sitting in his patrol car, sipping the last of his lukewarm coffee. He scanned the area lazily, his eyes falling on the various pedestrians going about their day. Across the street, a well-dressed black man, named Charles Lewis, was stepping out of a nearby cafe. Charles walked with an air of confidence that was impossible to miss. His tailored suit and calm demeanor gave him an aura of authority, something that caught Greg's eye immediately. And, as was often the case, Greg didn't appreciate it. What nobody knew, however, was that Charles had recently been promoted to captain and was about to take command of the very precinct where Greg worked. Greg, unaware of the significance of the man before him, felt a strange irritation bubbling inside him. As Charles crossed the street, Greg's attention shifted completely. He put down his coffee, his eyes narrowing. There was nothing inherently suspicious about Charles, but something about his confident stride and unbothered expression rubbed Greg the wrong way. Without any legitimate reason, Greg pushed open his patrol car door and stepped out, marching toward Charles with a scowl. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Greg barked, his tone sharp and dripping with aggression. The sudden confrontation made Charles pause, meeting Greg's glare with a calm but slightly surprised expression. "Just on my way to a meeting," Charles replied, his voice steady. His polite response only seemed to inflame Greg's irritation further. Greg wasn't interested in the answer. His eyes narrowed as he took a step closer, his posture tense, as if spoiling for a fight. "You look suspicious. Let me see some ID." His voice dripped with disdain, and the sneer on his face made his intentions clear. He was looking for trouble, not justice. Charles, still composed, met Greg's eyes and reached slowly into his jacket. "Sure, officer. I'm happy to comply," he said, his voice steady and unruffled. But before he could even get his wallet out, Greg's temper exploded like a fuse igniting a powder keg. "You think you can talk to me like that? Like you're some kind of big shot?" Greg growled, his face twisted with rage. He grabbed Charles by the arm roughly, his grip forceful and unyielding. And before Charles could react, Greg swung his fist, landing a solid punch square on Charles's face. The sudden violence stunned the few passers-by who had paused to observe the escalating confrontation. Charles stumbled backward, managing to keep his balance but visibly shaken by the blow. He steadied himself, his hand instinctively rising to touch his cheek where Greg's fist had landed, his fingers brushing the rapidly swelling skin. For a moment, silence hung in the air, thick and heavy, broken only by the sound of Greg's labored breathing. His face twisted into a smirk as he stared at Charles, clearly proud of himself. "Maybe now you'll learn some respect," Greg said, his voice dripping with misplaced triumph. Charles took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing with a resolve that hadn't been there before. Slowly, he straightened himself up, his entire demeanor shifting. The calmness that had marked his expression moments before was now replaced with an unmistakable aura of authority. "You just made a big mistake, officer," he said quietly, his voice cold. Greg snorted, oblivious to the gravity of what he had done. "Oh yeah? And what mistake is that?" he taunted, his confidence still unbroken. Charles fixed Greg with a steely, unwavering gaze. "I am Captain Charles Lewis, the new captain of this precinct," he stated firmly, his voice carrying a weight that made the onlookers hold their breath. For a moment, Greg's face went blank, all color draining as he struggled to comprehend the words. What did you say?" he stammered, his bravado evaporating. "I said," Charles repeated, stepping closer, I am the new captain of your precinct, and you've just assaulted your commanding officer." Greg stood frozen, his mind racing in a chaotic swirl of panic and disbelief. The realization hit him like a brick. He had just assaulted the new captain of his precinct. The crowd that had gathered around them was murmuring, some with their phones out, capturing every detail of the unfolding drama. The arrogance that had fueled Greg just moments before quickly crumbled, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. Charles calmly took out his phone, dialing a number. "This is Captain Lewis. I need a squad at Maple and Fifth Avenue," he said, his voice steady and professional. "There's been an incident involving Officer Greg Manning. No injuries on my side, but charges will be filed for assault. Send someone immediately." Greg's stomach twisted painfully. He could do nothing but watch as Charles spoke with the assuredness of a man who knew exactly how this would end. The power that had filled Greg so completely just minutes before had now vanished, replaced by the cold reality of the consequences about to come. Within minutes, the piercing wail of sirens filled the air, and 2 squad cars pulled up to the curb. A group of officers, Greg's colleagues, stepped out. Among them was Sergeant Parker, a no-nonsense woman whose 20 years in the department had earned her a reputation of being both fair and unyielding. She approached Charles, giving a respectful nod. "Captain Lewis," she said, her eyes flicking over to Greg, the confusion evident in her expression. "What's going on here?" "Sergeant Parker," Charles replied, his voice cool. "Officer Manning assaulted me without provocation. I am pressing charges." Parker's face hardened as she turned her full attention to Greg. "Is this true, Greg?" she asked, her tone leaving no room for evasion. Greg swallowed hard, his throat dry. The words caught in his mouth, and he struggled to speak. I didn't know," he stammered, his earlier bravado completely shattered. Parker shook her head, her expression a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. "It doesn't matter if you knew or not. You assaulted a superior officer," she said flatly. She turned to the other officers, her voice commanding. "Cuff him." 2 of the officers, men Greg had worked alongside for years, stepped forward. Their expressions were unreadable, their movements mechanical as they handcuffed Greg. He didn't resist. He knew there was no point. The cold metal around his wrists dug into his skin, a harsh reminder of the consequences of his unchecked actions. As Greg was led to the squad car, his hands cuffed tightly behind him, Sergeant Parker turned back to Charles, her face set with a stern expression. "Captain, we'll handle this by the book. Is there anything else you need?" Charles shook his head, the weight of the situation still settling in his eyes. "Just make sure it's done right, Sergeant. I'll be filing formal charges once we're back at the station." His voice was firm, leaving no room for leniency. Parker nodded, and the officers proceeded to guide Greg into the back of the squad car. The door closed with a heavy thud, and Greg stared out the window, his face drained of all color. He could feel his career unraveling in front of his eyes, each moment taking him further away from the person he had thought himself to be. Not long ago, Greg had felt untouchable. He had power, authority, and the freedom to wield it as he saw fit. But now, sitting in the back of the squad car, all of that was gone. He was nothing more than a criminal facing justice, stripped of the badge that had once given him his sense of control. Charles watched as the car pulled away, his expression unreadable. He then turned to the remaining officers, who had watched the entire scene unfold in stunned silence. "Thank you, everyone," Charles said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable gravity. "Let's make sure that respect is something we all practice, toward each other and toward the community we serve." The officers nodded, understanding the message that had been clearly demonstrated today. This was a turning point, a moment that would resonate within the precinct for a long time to come. Respect was not optional. It was the foundation of their duty, and it was something that Charles was determined to see upheld. Charles took a deep breath and adjusted his suit, turning to walk away. There was still work to be done, and today had only been the beginning. The precinct needed change, and that change had to start from within. Greg's actions were a harsh reminder of what happened when power was misused, and Charles was committed to ensuring that every officer understood the true meaning of service. As Charles walked toward his meeting, He knew that this incident, however painful, had been a necessary step in establishing the kind of leadership and respect that Bridgeport's community deserved. Greg had learned his lesson the hard way, but it was a lesson that needed to be learned for the greater good. Thank you all for staying with us until the end. We hope this story resonated with you and reminded you of the importance of respect, regardless of rank or position. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. We'd love to hear your thoughts. How would you have handled this situation if you were in Charles's shoes? Leave a comment below or send us your own stories. Until next time, take care and remember, everyone deserves respect, and together we can build a better community.